Welcome to Cayman Turtle Centre.
A day of fun and adventure awaits at Cayman Turtle Centre Island Wildlife Encounter. Swim and snorkel alongside sea turtles and other marine life. Meet tropical birds in the aviary, ride our turtle twister water slide, or simply relax by the lagoon. Plan your adventure today.
Visit us online at www.turtle.ky.
Welcome to the Green Scene. My name is Wendy Dandy, and I'm an Education Programs Officer at the Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Center. With me this morning is Mr. Geddes Hislop, the Curator of Terrestrial Exhibits and Education Programs at the Cayman Turtle Center, and also my fellow Education Programs Officer, as well as the Turtle Release Coordinator, Ms. Shona McGill. We're excited to bring you to the second episode of our new show, The Green Scene. Today we hope that you'll tune in every Saturday at 11 a.m. here on Bobo 89.1 FM as we talk all about conservation, wildlife, and much more. In each episode, we'll be exploring topics related to conservation here in the Cayman Islands, including protecting our natural environment and preserving our culture and heritage, as well as talking about sea turtles and other native species. On today's show, we'll be talking all about Cayman Turtle Centre's conservation initiatives and our efforts to revive the wild green sea turtle population here in the Cayman Islands. The topic of this show is one that we are all quite familiar with and proud to be a part of. The discussion today will cover a lot of material that we deliver to schools and corporate groups as part of our ACT series. ACT standing for Animal Conservation Talk. Act 1, which is our first of the series of 2 talks, is named How Many Came Home? And it's all about Cayman Turtle Centre's efforts to save the green turtle. So Geddes, tell us more.
Okay, so what we did was we looked at a study that was done back in 2016. It was a 2-year study, multidisciplinary program that was run as under the Darwin Plus initiative, which is an environmental fund out of the UK. And we worked together with the University of Barcelona, University of Exeter in the UK, University of Georgia, Cayman Turtle Centre, and the Department of Environment. And basically what the study did was look at the impact that the turtle release programs that we do here at the Cayman Turtle Centre, what impact it was having on the wild sea turtle population around the Cayman Islands. We looked at, basically compared the DNA of all of the turtles in our breeding herd to the wild nesting sea turtles around the Cayman Islands. Some of you may or may not know, the Cayman Turtle Centre has started as a private company called Mariculture Limited back in 1968. At the time, the idea was to create a commercial sea turtle farm. And in those days, the word conservation did not really exist as it does today. But the premise behind it was that no domesticated animal has ever gone extinct. And if you think about all the chickens that we have running around, yeah, I'll give you an idea. So what they thought was, if they can create a market for sea turtle meat, and that market was successful, humans would not let the species go extinct. Now this is not a new concept. In North America, for example, the bison, which is the national mammal of North America, of USA, they brought that back from the brink of extinction by ranching them. So once there was bison meat and farms and ranches, the bison didn't go extinct. They found ways to work with the genetics to keep a pure breeding herd, and now they're thundering across the plains of Wyoming again. So that was the idea behind the Turtle Conservation Education Center. At the time, Mariculture Limited, they had to find, they called founder stock, and in those days, Cayman didn't have a lot of sea turtles. They were pretty much functionally extinct around the islands, so they had to go far and wide. They went to Central America, South America, and they went to a place called Ascension Island, which is a little island off the coast of Brazil, out in the South Atlantic. And those programs went through a lot of iterations. They basically figured it out as they went because nobody had ever done it before. Pretty impressive to think that this tiny island with those limited resources was able to come up with this program and make it into what it was.
So basically you went all around the Caribbean and Central America to get a good DNA mix for a founding stock of turtle today.
Yeah. And again, in those days, DNA and genetic diversity, they weren't buzzwords anyway. But by default, Yeah, they came up with a good genetic mix.
Okay, and for our conservation efforts at the center, do you know when releases were first started?
Yeah, the releases started late 1979, early 1980s. That's when they officially started the release programs because they started breeding. Once they figured out how to breed the turtles in captivity, they started releasing, and these releases were they released them in the waters around the Cayman Islands. They released hatchlings as well as what they call head starts. Head starts are turtles that are raised up to 1, 2 years old, and they were released into the waters around, into the Caribbean. And interestingly, when they released them, some of them were tagged, and they had these titanium clips on their flippers, kind of like a bling, like an earring, and they offered a reward, $5 if you picked up a tag and sent it back to us. So doing it that way, they got tag returns from as far north as the Florida Keys, as far south as Venezuela, and even out into the Eastern Caribbean, I think Grenada and Barbados. Wow. They picked up a few tag returns, as well as Central America. So that meant that those releases weren't just affecting the Cayman Islands, but potentially affecting the wider Caribbean. It's great. The program was working.
Okay, so your first at talk specifically, who do you deliver this to? I know that it goes into detail about our conservation efforts. Who is this delivered to? Is it something that's paid for? Is it a free program?
Well, the ACT talks, or the animal conservation talks, as we call them, they're part of our education outreach. And what we're doing at Cayman Turtle Centre, we want to spread our story. We want people to know that we're more than just a tourist attraction. They ask the average person, what do we do at the Turtle Centre? We have lots of tourists. We take care of turtles, that kind of thing. Not many people know what goes on behind the scenes. And that's what this story is about. The impact that we're having on the sea turtle population around the Cayman Islands. And if I could also mention, releasing sea turtles, and we mentioned this in the ACT talk, is not just a matter of putting turtles out there. There's a whole process to it. We could talk a little bit more about that later.
Okay, so before we go on to break, I just wanted to clarify as well. When it comes to turtle populations in the wild, what is the difference with Cayman Turtle Centre and the Department of Environment? For example, if there's a hurt turtle in the wild, can it be brought to the center?
Oh, no. Yeah, Department of Environment and the Turtle Centre, we're both government entities, but our goals are the same, but our roles are different. We do what we call ex situ conservation. Ex situ means outside of the environment. We deal with captive turtles. All the turtles in the park that you see there, the majority of them, they're captive bred. And our job is to get them from the center into the water. Once they hit the water, they're a wild sea turtle and protection under the National Conservation Law of the Cayman Islands. And that's where the Department of Environment takes over. So we inform them of our releases, and they do the conservation work out in the field. But the two complement each other because we do a lot of hands-on research for the turtles that helps not only the Department of Environment, but other conservation entities around the world use our information to help design their conservation programs and management of sea turtle populations in the wild.
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying the difference for that because people do wonder. And just a bit more information before we start getting into the grid of it and going into our first commercial break. To date, do you have any idea how many turtles have been released into the wild by the center?
Yeah, we've hit a milestone recently. We've released so far, at least, I should say, 36,000 captive bred turtles into the wild since the program began. Now, that is a lot of turtles. And just to point out, and to answer an earlier question, that doesn't mean that all 36,000 are out there because some of them that includes hatchlings. And most people may know that sea turtles have a lot of threats out there. So just releasing a bunch of hatchlings, it doesn't mean all of them are going to come back. They have to go through predators, they have to surpass plastics, boats, all those hazards out there. So in the wild, they say it's 1 in 1,000 hatchlings will make it back as an adult. With our program, we think they have a much better chance. But we think that the wave of them is starting to come back now. And that's what we can talk about that a little later, I guess.
All right. Thank you for that, Mr. Geddes. So we're going to go into our first break. Listeners, please stay tuned. Thanks for listening so far to The Green Scene, brought to you by the Cayman Turtle Centre. We'll be back after these messages and we'll speak more to Miss Shona.
Welcome to Cayman Turtle Centre.
A day of fun and adventure awaits at Cayman Turtle Centre Island Wildlife Encounter. Swim and snorkel alongside sea turtles and other marine life. Meet tropical birds in the aviary, ride our turtle twister water slide, or simply relax by the lagoon. Plan your adventure today.
Visit us online at www.turtle.ky. The Green Scene, hosted by Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Centre.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to The Green Scene, brought to you by the Cayman Turtle Centre. I'm Wendy Dandy, and I'm here today with Miss Shona McGill, one of the Education Programs Officers at the Cayman Turtle Centre, and Mr. Geddes Hislop, the Curator of Terrestrial Exhibits at the Cayman Turtle Centre as well. So we were talking about the conservation efforts of the Turtle Centre and the importance to the Cayman Islands. So the next question I'd like to get into is green sea turtles. We know that's what the center specializes in, and it means a lot to our islands. So Ms. Shona, could you tell me the green sea turtle, what does it mean to Cayman and why is it so important? Why the green sea turtle?
Yeah, definitely. So we all know the green turtle plays a really important role in the history and the culture of the Cayman Islands. If you pull out your $5 bill, you can see a turtle on there. It's a hawksbill, but it's still a turtle. Or even if you just look at our coat of arms, there's a turtle on there as well. And if you specifically look at the coloring of that turtle, it's a green turtle. And turtles have been an important part of our culture since we were discovered. So Ferdinand Columbus first spotted our islands because of turtles. I know it's a common misconception that Christopher Columbus spotted our islands. He recorded them, but he just took all the fame and credit from his son, Ferdinand, for discovering them. And Ferdinand said they were in so much they looked like rocks. So there were actually so many turtles around our islands, they looked like a coral reef. And that's what caused the Cayman Islands to be discovered and literally be put on the map in the first place. So they play an important role in that respect, but also culturally, the Cayman Islands is not well known for having good agriculture. So a lot of our first initial industries were mariculture and going out into the ocean and doing various types of fishing for the people here to make their livelihoods and build their families and building the islands as a whole.
Absolutely, Shona. They're definitely a very important part of our culture and identity. I also do know that they are keystone species, aren't they? So could you tell me more about that and how they play a role in sustaining a healthy environment, marine environment?
Of course I can. So green turtles are a keystone species, as we touched upon, and I always like to make a joke of us scientists coming up with really funny things to just mean very simple things. So to make things easier for myself, I think of a keystone species like the game of Jenga. If you haven't played Jenga before, it's basically this big block tower. You pull a block out and you stack it on top. If you're a person that pulls the block out that makes the whole tower fall apart, you lose. Now, personally, I'm not very good at Jenga, so I usually lose for the most part. But that block you pull that makes everything fall apart, that is a keystone species. So green turtles play a really important role in the marine environment as a keystone species. They are one of the largest marine herbivores. So other marine herbivores you guys might know of are things like dugongs and manatees. Here in the Cayman Islands, we don't have those. We have much smaller herbivores, but also the green turtle. So for green turtles, they eat green things, to make it very simple.
Okay.
So these green things that they eat turn their fat green, which is how they get their name. They don't get their name because they eat green things. It's just a good way to remember it. So green turtles eat things like seaweed and seagrass and algae. Seagrass beds are incredible nursery habitats for multiple marine species like crustaceans, lobsters, crabs, or mollusks like conch shells. So they help act as lawnmowers of the ocean, helping keep these seagrass beds nice and healthy nursery habitats for these species. But they also help protect our islands because seagrass beds help cement the ocean floor, protecting us from storm surges. And if any of you are snorkelers or divers, especially now with climate change, I at least, because I like diving, have personally noticed an increase of algae on our coral reefs. And where algae grows, it starts to smother corals and they die. So we really rely on these marine herbivores to eat that algae to keep our coral reefs thriving. And we do focus on the green turtle, but all species of sea turtle, all 7 species, play an ecological role in the marine environment.
Thank you for breaking that down for us. These guys are really important as they're one of the few large herbivores, as you said. So other species of sea turtle, what other species of sea turtle can be found around the Cayman Islands?
So around the Cayman Islands, I should clarify, in the waters around the Cayman Islands, we do have 4 species of sea turtle. So we have the green sea turtle, we have the loggerhead sea turtle, we have the hawksbill sea turtle, and then very rarely and occasionally we have the leatherback sea turtle, which is the largest sea turtle in the world. The first 3 nest here in the Cayman Islands. The leatherbacks do not nest here.
Okay, well, thank you for telling us about the species found around the waters around the Cayman Islands. So the conservation efforts at the center, they focus on the green sea turtle, correct?
Correct. We do not have any other species of sea turtle at the center other than the green sea turtle.
Okay, can you tell me of some of these conservation efforts for our listeners out there who are not aware?
So we have multiple different types of release programs we do at the center, which focuses on the green sea turtle. And we do it from various life stages as well. So from eggs all the way to head-started turtles, which, as the name implies, we give them a head start. So the first one we do is something called a nest translocation. So when we started, we initially got turtles from the wild. Now we are self-sustaining, so we don't take any eggs or any turtles from the wild environment. So nest translocations are when we take our own captive bred eggs from the center and implant them on local beaches. At this point, these eggs are about 50 days of incubation, so approximately 10 days from hatching. And we'll have volunteers there watching over the eggs every night. And these eggs are buried 3 feet below the sand, exactly the same depth as wild turtle nests, but also the nests of our turtles at the center. And these turtles hatch out of their eggs and emerge as they would from a wild nest. Then we go into our jumpstart releases. So a jumpstart, we jump past quite a few of the predators these turtles might,
Night releases.
nighttime releases. So we're going to go into after nest translocations. So the second type of release we do is our nighttime hatchling releases. So this is when we take our hatchlings that emerged in our hatchery at the center, and we'll take them out at night and release them from the shoreline. And they'll walk their way into the ocean. These turtles are about 3 to 5 days old, where their belly buttons or yolk sacs have completely healed over. And at this process, we use red lights, because sea turtles do not see the red spectrum of light as well as they do white. Sea turtle hatchlings will follow the moonlight into the ocean, so if there's any bright white light on the beach, they're going to follow that instead. So we ensure that our team uses red lights and that we're also carrying out these releases at areas which are dark or already have turtle-friendly lighting installed. And this will replicate a natural emergence from a nest as they would in the wild.
Okay, nice. So for these hatchling night releases, around how much hatchlings at a time? Because I remember you mentioning earlier about the predation risk for these smaller guys. So is it in a big number that you release them?
We usually release the hatchlings at much larger numbers. It's all honestly dependent of the release at that time. But at our nighttime releases, we can release anywhere between 50 to over 100 turtle hatchlings, which is about the same as a wild turtle nest because they'll lay anywhere between 50 to 200 eggs.
Wow, so people can come out to see this where we get almost up to 100 turtles being released on the beach at a time. That's great. Okay. Before I venture off, we'll get back later on to how you can come in to see these releases. And what's your next type of release?
So our next type of release is our jumpstart turtle releases. So this just means we jump ahead. We try to eradicate a majority of the predators that these hatchlings will encounter in the wild. As Getty's touched upon a little bit earlier, the odds are forever against a baby sea turtle. Their rate of survival is estimated to be 1 in 1,000. And a majority of their predators are concentrated closer to shore, whether that's on the beach from things like fire ants or ghost crabs or any type of seabird like night herons. And then once they get into the water, there are even more dangers out there. Any type of predatory fish, such as barracudas, mahi-mahi, will make a meal out of a baby sea turtle. So our jumpstart release tries to get past most of these predators. So with this process, what we do is we'll take a boat out past the drop-off to really deep water in search of sargassum mats. So if any of you have been to the beach recently or in past years, you might have noticed that lovely brown or orange seaweed that congregates closer to shore. That is sargassum seaweed. When it's close to shore, we don't like it that much. It's pretty smelly. But out in the open ocean, that is incredible habitat for a baby sea turtle. And it's what they're looking for when they go out into the wild. So it provides baby sea turtle hatchlings with shelter from predators like seabirds or predatory fish. It allows them to rest so they can sleep in amongst the seaweed. Or they'll also eat in there, so any little creatures or the seaweed itself. And they'll stay in that sargassum seaweed mat for their first few years of life till they're strong enough to come back closer to shore. So in doing this, we hope to increase their rate of survival by going past all these other types of predators. And then the final release that we do is called our Head Started program. So all of these have little keywords. So a head start, as I said earlier, just means we give the turtle a head start in life. So these are turtles we raise at the center till they're between 1 to 2 years old and release them into the wild. At this point, their shell has fully hardened over, and their only real predators are large sharks, humans, or human-made issues.
Okay, so thanks for telling us in detail about those 4 different types of releases. So the Head Start, I believe that's the most popular. That's the one the public's most used to seeing, where you release the older turtle between 1 and 2 years old.
Yeah, I definitely say our Head Started Turtle Release program is probably the most visible with the public. We've been hosting public turtle releases for them for quite a while now. Most recently, we had our Earth Day turtle release this month, where people came out and observed that. We also have our World Sea Turtle Day release on June 16th every year, because that's an important date for us. And we have our Pirates Week turtle release as well, where we invite the public to come and watch those. But it's not just public releases. We also have turtle release sponsorship options available as well. So people can sponsor a turtle for release, whether that's a corporate sponsorship or a small private group as well. These opportunities are available to them. And now we are starting to go into our turtle nesting season. So later on in the year, we will have opportunities for nest translocations and also hatchling releases as well.
Okay, so for listeners and interested parties out there who are interested in either attending a release, a nighttime release coming up over summer, or maybe volunteering, how or who would they get in touch with? How would they go about trying to volunteer or purchase tickets or find out dates?
So if you'd be interested in attending one of our turtle releases or potentially even sponsoring your own turtle to be released, you can reach out to info@turtle.ky for more information. And then any opportunity to attend one of our turtle releases any of our public releases, whether that's hatchling, nest translocation, or Head Start, are all publicized on our social media pages. So please keep an eye out for that on our Facebook page, our Instagram page. Now, this is how you can be a part of attending one of our turtle releases. But if you are interested in helping volunteering with any of our programs, you can also email info@turtle.ky for more information on those as well. We're always looking for volunteers, whether that's watching our eggs for our nest translocations, so you can potentially get the opportunity to see baby turtles emerge from a nest, or whether that's our Head Started release program as well.
Well, thank you for that information. Now, I know you can't give me an exact date, but we are kind of at the end of what people who experience seasons would call spring. And I know these releases to come and view and volunteer, they're over the summer. I know it kind of comes down to biology at the end of the day, but could you tell me basically around when in summer, like basically is it at the beginning, the middle, or the endish, just so people can kind of have an idea?
Yeah,
'Cause I know it doesn't happen all summer long.
No, you're correct. We're working with a living animal, so it's a little bit hard to regulate the dates of releases and when we will have hatchlings. Usually we have hatchlings between the months of May to October. Most of our hatchling releases do occur during these months. So I know in the past we've had a lot of our hatchling releases in July and August. So I would be comfortable in saying those are probably the two main months to be a part of those releases. But I would just say, because we work with a living animal, please keep an eye out on our social media pages for any announcements on any of those opportunities.
Okay, Shauna, thank you for that information. That was very helpful and informative for all our listeners out there. And we are celebrating over 55 years of conservation. So when we're back after these messages, we'll get into the details and the grit about the studies that we've done and the conservation efforts from the center and how it's contributed to the islands. So please stay tuned, and we'll be back with the green scene after these messages.
Welcome to Cayman Turtle Centre.
A day of fun and adventure awaits at Cayman Turtle Centre Island Wildlife Encounter. Swim and snorkel alongside sea turtles and other marine life. Meet tropical birds in the aviary, ride our turtle twister water slide, or simply relax by the lagoon. Plan your adventure today.
Visit us online at www.turtle.ky. The Green Scene, hosted by Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Center.
Welcome back to the Green Scene, brought to you by the Cayman Turtle Centre. You're here with Wendy, and I'm here with Shona and Geddes from the Cayman Turtle Centre as well. So we've been talking all about the importance of green sea turtle and the Turtle Centre's conservation efforts this morning. So to continue on to our talk, we'd like to finish up with talking about the How Many Came Home study. So Geddes, what can you tell me about that?
Well, in 2016, there was a multidisciplinary study that was conducted together as part of a Darwin Plus initiative. That's an environmental program out of the UK. And it was a collaboration between the University of Exeter in the UK, University of Barcelona in Spain, University of Georgia in the USA, the Cayman Turtle Centre, and the Department of Environment. Basically what they did was they was looking at the impact that the Cayman Turtle Centre's release programs had on the wild sea turtle population around the Cayman Islands. And the way they studied that was by comparing the DNA of sea turtles at the Cayman Turtle Centre's breeding herd, the mamas and the papas that produce all the eggs, and compare that DNA, those DNA markers, to the wild breeding sea turtle population around the Cayman Islands. So the study took 2 years to undergo, but the results were pretty interesting. So basically what the study did was these turtles that we've been releasing since the 1980s, early 1980s, most of them are tiny turtles. They're about, I have to say, half and half. There were half of them were hatchlings, half of them were head starts. And as Shauna said earlier, head starts are turtles that are 1 to 2 years old. Hatchlings are basically Oreo cookie size little swimming pieces of food. That's the way I look at them. In those days, they didn't have the technology to really track them. They could put flipper tags on the head starts. The smaller turtles, they actually came up with something called a living tag. A living tag is where they take a piece of the soft underbelly of a hatchling and graft it into the black upper part, the carapace, the soft shell of a hatchling. So basically they switch around, like giving the turtle a kind of a tattoo. And that was one of the ways that we're able to determine later on when turtles started coming back as adults, if our turtles were coming back at all. The purpose of this study was to get a better idea of exactly how effective the program was. Because we received a lot of criticisms. We're working with an animal that's very slow breeding, long-lived, takes a long time to mature. Sea turtles don't get to sexual maturity until maybe 15 years old at the center, but in the wild, they assume that they reach sexual maturity sometime in their 20s to 30s. At the center, of course, they have much better welfare, much better care and nutrition. Out in the wild, they have all kinds of stresses. They have to search for their food, so it takes a little bit longer for them to mature. So these guys here, we have to, by the time they come back, we're talking about releases started in 1980. We're looking at the 2000s. So when we looked at the Department of Environment's beach nesting surveys, looking at the number of turtles nesting on the beaches, when they started in 1999, they found one green sea turtle nest. Wow. And we know prior to that, green turtles were supposed to be functionally extinct around the Cayman Islands until the Turtle Centre started its release program. Now, people might have been seeing a lot of sea turtles in the water, but that doesn't mean that they were sexually mature. So we will concentrate on the breeding population. And these breeding turtles, they were checking by looking at how many nests were coming up on the beaches. If you look at a graph of it, in 1999, they had one nest, green sea turtle nest. But as they went on in the subsequent years, going into the 2000 and onwards, that number slowly began to increase. So that gave us, and that coincided with the fact that 20 years later, that wave of released turtles should have reached sexual maturity and they should be coming back. So there was anecdotal evidence to suggest that turtles were coming back. And we knew because some of them, we had actually come across some of our tag turtles on the beaches. So this study was a little more in-depth to that.
And so with these studies, what did you find? What were the findings of the studies?
What they found was when they looked at DNA, in the early days of the program, when they started in the 1960s, they had to find turtles, found a stock from around the Caribbean. They went to Central America, South America, collected turtles and eggs from Central and South America, but they also collected turtles and eggs from a place called Ascension Island, which is a volcanic island out in the middle of the South Atlantic, off the coast of Brazil. When they looked at the DNA markers, they found DNA markers from turtles in the North Caribbean, which made sense. Turtles in the South Caribbean, that also made sense because turtles, they don't recognize borders, they range far and wide. But they also found DNA markers from turtles from the South Atlantic. And the only place the wild turtles around the Cayman Islands could get those markers were from our turtles that were released out there. So it showed that they were breeding. Right? So that gave us hope because, we knew the turtles. Some criticisms was also saying because these turtles were an insular population, maybe they weren't effective breeders because of inbreeding. Just having those DNA markers out there in the wild meant that they were breeding and breeding effectively.
So the Ascension Island population was like your control for DNA markers, basically.
Yeah, that was the indicator. That was the top indicator.
So with the studies, from what I'm understanding, before we continue, is the studies you guys taking DNA samples of outside breeding populations, so the females nesting in the wild coming up on the beach.
Yes.
And so you were sampling their DNA and comparing it with our DNA records of our original breeder stock to see if they're related and how closely related.
Yes,
Right?
so
Put
that's
that in non-technical terms.
well, yeah. We look at the DNA.
Right.
We can actually tell, and the cool thing about DNA as technology goes on is that we could tell which females in our breeding herd are breeding with
Wow.
which males.
Oh,
So we can actually see, we can actually tell, the diversity. And you know what? And an interesting thing that they found out as a result of this study is that a female turtle on average mates with anywhere from 5 to 7 males. And
okay.
that's not too surprising because when you think about this, a female turtle will lay anywhere from 60 to 150, 200 eggs over the course of a season. Well, each time she lays over the course of a season. In the wild, that could be anywhere from 3 to 5 times. Our turtles at the center can lay up to 8 times. And that's a lot of, they need a lot of genetic material
Right. So
to produce those
basically she's
eggs.
storing genetic information so it
Yes.
can spread throughout DNA
Right.
throughout her eggs.
So the turtles themselves, even within that insular population at our breeding herd, there is variety. I mean, the turtles themselves all come from different areas, so there's genetic variety there. And then the female itself would mate with different males. So there's variety within, again.
One female laying for the season as
Yeah, that's talk about a melting
which
pot.
changes every year as well.
Yeah,
Okay,
that-
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for breaking that down for us. All right, so now that we know what the study was looking at and what kind of information you were collecting and how you collected it, tell me more about the findings. Like, what did the study conclude?
Okay, so back in 2016, there was a study that was commissioned to see what the impact of Cayman Turtle Center's release programs over the last 55 years was like. This study was funded by the Darwin Plus initiative out of the UK, and it was a multidisciplinary study, international study, which involved University of Exeter from the UK, University of Barcelona from Spain, University of Georgia in the USA, the Department of Environment, and of course the Cayman Turtle Centre. The thing is, this study was actually a follow-up to a previous study done back in, I believe it was the early 1990s. Right? And that study, the title of that study was called They Came Home. And what they were doing in that study, they tracked the turtles that they were releasing to see if they were actually coming back. In those days, they didn't have the technology they had today. So what they did was, as Shauna had said earlier, they used flipper tags for the head-started turtles. And for the smaller turtles, the hatchlings are basically, like you said, it's like an Oreo cookie with flippers. Okay. Hatchlings have black carapace, and the carapace is the shell. And underside, the plastron, as it's called, is white. So they came up with a technology called a living tag, where they take a piece of the belly shell, let's call it that, and put it on the back shell. Right, they graft it to the back shell. So what they end up with is a little hatchling with a white dot on the shell. And that dot, according to where that dot was placed on the hatchling, it could correspond to a year that hatchling was hatched. And it grew with that hatchling, kind of like a tattoo. So that's why they call it a living tag. So the earlier study, back in the early 90s, that study looked at turtles that were coming back to Cayman, coming up from Cayman beaches to nest, and they looked for living tag turtles, basically looking to check the turtles back to see if there's a white spot in it, and turtles with flipper tags. And at that time, they proved that the turtles that the Turtle Center was releasing were coming back to breed. So we forward again to 2016. This study called How Many Came Home, the first one was called They Came Home, which proved that they were returning to breed. This study called How Many Came Home, they looked at the impact of the exactly how many came home, as the study says. And what they did was they used DNA. So tracking turtles, most of the times when we release turtles, people ask if we track them. Yes, we do track them in a sense, because all the turtles, the head starts anyway that are released, have pit tags, a microchip put in their shoulder, just like you put a chip in a dog or a cat. But that chip is not a satellite tag. Satellite tags are very expensive. Right? They have to have a battery, they have to have a shelf life, and you have to buy time in the satellite. So most of the satellite release turtles we get are sponsored. Okay? And even then, it only lasts a few months, depending on the battery. And it has to be, and most satellite tags are fairly large. So it has to be on a large turtle. Technology is getting smaller and smaller, though. We're actually at the Turtle Centre. We're working with a company that's working on a satellite tag that's roughly about the size of a watch face. So the tags are getting smaller and smaller. I don't know if it gets small enough to put in a hatchling, but now we can track turtles that are even smaller. However, the background to this study was that before people started hunting turtles in Cayman, turtling as a way of living, sea turtles were functionally extinct on the islands because the European colonists or the European explorers that came through the Caribbean, they would collect female turtles from Cayman, put them on their ships, and sail off with them to use them for fresh meat. And over time, by the late or early 1800s, sea turtles were pretty much gone from the Cayman Islands. So all those turtles that Columbus mentioned in his journal, they were gone by the 1800s. So the Department of Environment started their beach nesting surveys, walking the beaches of the Cayman looking for nesting sea turtles. They started that in 1999. And when they started that program, they found one green sea turtle nest in 1999.
Just one.
Just one.
Wow.
But the thing is, very soon afterwards, as they got into 2020 and onwards, the numbers of green turtle nests began to grow. Now that, coupled with the fact that green turtles in the wild take roughly 20 years to reach sexual maturity, and we know the turtles come back to the beaches that they were hatched on to lay their eggs, that kind of gave us another indication that wave of turtles we started releasing from the 1980s, they should be reaching sexual maturity and coming back. So looking at that chart. So what this study did was, by comparing the DNA of the wild nesting females to the DNA of the turtles in our breeding herd, right, we were able to tell relationships through DNA. And DNA is pretty cool. You don't need a marker. You don't need to put on a tag in them. You don't need to put a flipper tag. You don't need to put any technology in them. All you need is a blood sample or a biological sample anyway. And incidentally, what we did with this, we were able to look at the genetic profile of all the turtles in our breeding herd. And from that, we could tell what females were breeding with which males. We could tell which males were dominant and which males were not. And just as an incidental fact, we found out that a female sea turtle, on average, will mate with anywhere from 5 to 7 males during the nesting season. Right? So when you're a female and you coming up on the beach to lay your eggs, in the wild they can lay anywhere from 3 to 5 times. At the center, because they're pretty much pampered turtles, they don't have any stress, they will lay up to 8 times. So you need a lot of genetic material. Potentially a female laying anywhere between 50 to 150 eggs could lay easily 800 eggs in a season.
Oh, wow.
So that's a lot of genetic material.
A lot.
And the good thing is that we know now for sure that these turtles there's genetic diversity. When they collected the turtles in the first place, back in the 60s, they collected turtles from Central America, from South America, and also from a place called Ascension Island, which is a volcanic island way off the coast of Brazil in the middle of the South Atlantic. So at the center, the breeding herd is a mixed population already. There's genetic diversity within the breeding herd. And then a female will mate with a variety of males. So there's genetic diversity in her breeding as well. So one of the criticisms we used to get was we have an insular population there at the Cayman Turtle Centre. There's a possibility that some will be releasing turtles that can't breed, or that would compromise the breeding process out there in the wild. But yeah, the genetic diversity was already there. Plus, we found genetic diversity out in the wild as well.
All right, well, Geddes, that was a mouthful. Thank you for telling us in detail about all of the DNA work that's been done with the turtles and how thorough the work has been and extensive over the years, alongside with not just the Turtle Center, but the Department of Environment monitoring wild populations.
Yeah. Just to mention also as a side to the study, we also looked at the socio-economic impact of sea turtles, of the Turtle Center. Basically, what they did was they asked the question, what would happen if the Turtle Center shut down tomorrow? The short story is, our turtles, our breeding turtles, would probably be wiped out in less than a year.
Wow.
Because as a result of this study, they did a kind of a secret shopper thing, asking people about their turtle meat consumption around the Cayman Islands. And based on that, and the number of people that still eat turtle meat and will eat turtle meat, no matter where they get it from, they figured that, yeah, turtles would be, if the Turtle Center shut down tomorrow, with it supplying turtle meat for the local consumption only, which is part of our government mandate, actually.
It is our national dish.
It is a national dish. And there are people that have been raised on turtle meat, and they want their turtle. And they don't ask any questions as to where it came from. But selling turtle meat at the Turtle Center is actually a conservation program. And maybe I could put a plug in here. One of my favorite pet peeves is that people tend to think of conservation and preservation as the same thing, but they're not. They have the same goal, but they're two different methods. So, and the example I use, that preservation is like, you put something away, you put it in a bottle, you tie it up in a glass, don't touch it. That's like what museums do. And everything in a museum is dead. Conservation means wise use of a resource. Use it in a sustainable way. Because when you have things like plastics at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, and plastics and animals in the Antarctic, as remote as you can get, plastics at the top of Mount Everest, there's nowhere in this planet that humans don't have some impact one way or the other. So the best we can do is mitigate it. Try to reduce the impact as much as possible. So conservation, people used to say, well, how can you say you're conserving an endangered animal by eating it? Well, yeah, people are eating it anyway. But what we do, our job is to provide a sustainable source of turtle meat. Not wild turtles. We don't deal with any wild turtles.
And from what I understand, that is one of the mandates for the companies by
Yes.
the government.
Yes, it is. It's one of our mandates. One of our mandates. Well, I'll give you an example. During COVID lockdown, in 1 week, there were 12 reports of poaching attempts. 12.
Well,
in 1 week.
and the 12 females being taken out of a population just coming back. That's
Yes.
a big dent.
That is a big dent. Because each female could potentially produce hundreds of hatchlings. So the government told us to reopen the turtle meat sales. Right, so we got special passes to be able to be out on the road, and we were selling turtle meat again. Because poaching is economics. If the risk is worth the reward, they will go for it. If you flood the market with cheap turtle meat, then it affects the price, like oil prices.
So if I'm correct, that is the only thing subsidized by the government.
Oh, yeah.
You sell the meat at a loss, clearly. Just to make this clear, since we're talking about this, you sell it at a loss to undercut poachers.
Yes.
Right? So does it make sense to go poaching because they wouldn't get the profit margins that it's worth?
Right.
Or anyway.
The whole idea
So
is,
although it does sound contradictory, it's well proven it is absolutely necessary in order to conserve and help future wild populations grow and
Yes.
sustain and thrive.
yeah, that's right. Because you actually have a portion of the turtle population in the center which are dedicated for meat production.
Okay.
And when you think about it, just to make sure, in the wild, turtles lay a whole bunch of eggs and hatch out a whole bunch of hatchlings. Not all those hatchlings are going to make it anyway. Nature just chooses the best of the best. So in our selection process, the best of the best are the ones that get released anyway.
And I mean, this is decades of doing this. So your survival rate and hatchling rate, I imagine you've perfected this over the years and you have
Yeah,
quite a high hatching success rate,
yeah,
survival rate.
yeah. Well, hatching, we are working with live animals, so it varies from time to time. But generally speaking, yes, the hatch rate is much better because, like I said, the turtles are pampered. They get fed well. They don't have any stress. They have a great health plan. So yeah, we have quite a good hatching
We have
success
a great
compared to the
team of
wild.
biologists as well working on the efforts.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Geddes. We're going to stop right here for a moment to take a break to listen to a few of our sponsors. And then we'll come back and get more into turtle conservation and the efforts that have been put forth by the Cayman Turtle Centre in reviving the wild populations of green sea turtles around the Cayman Islands and potentially the Caribbean. So we'll be back after these messages, and thank you for listening to The Green Scene.
Welcome to Cayman Turtle Centre.
A day of fun and adventure awaits at Cayman Turtle Centre Island Wildlife Encounter. Swim and snorkel alongside sea turtles and other marine life. Meet tropical birds in the aviary, ride our turtle twister water slide, or simply relax by the lagoon. Plan your adventure today.
Visit us online at www.turtle.ky. The Green Scene, hosted by Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Center.
Welcome back to The Green Scene, brought to you by the Cayman Turtle Center. You're tuned in with Wendy, and I'm here in the studio with Shona and Geddes, also from the Cayman Turtle Center. So right before our commercial break, Mr. Geddes spoke to us about the parameters of the study and the conservation efforts by the center. So let's get into the results. Can you guys tell me, what did you find? What were the findings of the results taken from testing all of the wild breeding population that were coming back to the islands?
So, as Geddes touched upon earlier, we already knew our turtles were coming back from previous studies, but I can confidently say even we were surprised just with how positive the results were for our release program. We used a universal tracker for these guys, DNA, blood. That's not going to fall off like a satellite tag. And surprisingly, we found multiple markers in the blood of these wild female turtles which were sampled. We found markers of turtles from the northern Caribbean, which we expected. We found markers of turtles from the southern Caribbean, which we expected. But we also found markers for turtles from the South Atlantic. The biggest input of South Atlantic DNA would come from our turtles, especially those from Ascension Island. So it was positive to us that our turtles were surviving. Their DNA was out in the wild. So then that study dove even further and looked at the relationship between them as well. It was a big question of if the turtles come back, but we also wanted to see if they survive and thrive out there, if they continue breeding and play a huge role in the mating population of the Cayman Islands as well. And we found results of full siblings to turtles from the Turtle Center. We found results of half siblings. We found parent and offspring relationships. And then there were a few unrelated samples as expected. So these results to us just told us confidently that our turtles were out there and surviving and being an important part of the breeding turtle population in the Cayman Islands. And we got a percentage value of the wild nesting turtles, which are related to ours at the center, and that percentage was 90%.
Wow, so those numbers are absolutely amazing. 90% is unprecedented results, especially with dealing with an endangered species. So this is a world-class conservation program that we have going on here in the Cayman Islands.
Yeah, I definitely say so. I mean, if I got 90% on a test, I would be pretty impressed.
Yeah,
by those
I mean, for
numbers.
such a small island too, we're a dot in, kind of in the middle of the Atlantic, basically. And this is, I assume that we can be used as a model for other conservation efforts around the world on how to build a program on conserving other long-lived reptile species or other marine turtles as well.
Yeah, I'm sure we can. I know there are quite a few reptile organizations that are quite impressed with the work that we do at Cayman Turtle Centre. But we work with a slow maturing species, so it did take time for our results to come back, and we are quite enjoying the results that we're seeing and that turtles are recovering. I will say, though, it's not just in part to us. We do our turtle releases, but Department of Environment does incredible work in taking care of our wild turtle nests and protecting them too. So we definitely need to give credit where credit's due to Department of Environment for taking care of those wild nests. And sometimes they even relocate turtle nests that are in vulnerable locations and move them to somewhere more preferable. So they are doing huge work with that.
And thank you for that. Absolutely agreed. Big ups to the Department of Environment as well for helping us with our conservation efforts, or the island, not us, the island with the conservation efforts for species of importance. So for the public out there who want to also help and contribute, I heard Geddes mention something earlier in the show about red lighting. So as it is hatching season now, or laying season, and the females are coming up, is there any message you want to send out there to the people who want to help be more sustainable and environmentally conscious to help our populations?
I would definitely encourage anyone that lives near the water or on the water to transfer any outside lights to turtle-friendly lighting.
And what's turtle-friendly lighting?
So baby turtle hatchlings will follow the moonlight to the ocean. And truly, that's just any bright white light on the beach they'll follow and think that's the way to make their way into the water. So if a complex has really bright white lights, it can cause the hatchlings to become disorientated and make their way into pools, sometimes onto roads and in bushes, and become tangled. So sea turtles can't see the red wavelength of light as effectively. So something as simple as changing your white lights to red or amber lighting can have a massive impact on sea turtles, or sea turtle hatchlings, making their way into the oceans. But it's not just lighting that's an issue too, it's obstacles on the beaches. A female will come up and test a beach before she actually does lay, and if there are any obstacles, she might choose not to lay her eggs there. So I would encourage, if you have any beach chairs out, to maybe move those out of the way at nighttime to make it a little bit easier for a mommy sea turtle to come up onto the beach to lay her eggs.
Okay, thanks for that helpful tip or two. And what about you, Geddes? Any tips to share?
Well, I'd just like to make my comments to add to what Shauna mentioned about the results. We've been working with a very ancient species of animal, a slow-growing, slow-maturing, long-lived animal, and it took a while for us to get to this stage. Yeah, 90% is great, but that doesn't mean the work stops. We can keep improving. Like I said earlier, we started with flipper tags, and now we're into DNA markers. So yeah, we keep improving, we keep getting better. And I should mention also that our work also doesn't just benefit the Cayman Islands. We record all these results in peer-reviewed papers. We have an international database, inventory database called ZIMS, or Species 360, where we record all our husbandry work, and all these results benefit programs not just in the Cayman Islands but also around the world. We receive accolades from IUCN, International Union for the Conservation of Nature, for recording this work and putting it out there, because it's benefited programs in, turtle conservation programs as far away as Australia. They've used that information that we have there to help them better manage their turtle populations in the wild. And yeah, working with Department of Environment, like I said before, we're both working on the same thing. We want to conserve our national icon. And in doing so, what we're really doing is ocean conservation, because we're taking care of the caretakers of the ocean. Shauna mentioned a keystone species. Scrubbing algae on a reef is not an easy task if you're going to get divers to do it. But the turtles are doing it out there for free, if you want to think of it that way. So if we take care of the caretakers of the ocean, then it benefits us all. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that, like I said before, I know we've received a lot of criticism in the past because people didn't understand how the program works, and it's not instant results. But I came across a quote by a gentleman called Dr. Carl Jones. He's a chief scientific officer at the Durrell Conservation Wildlife Trust. And if anybody knows anything about them, it's an internationally renowned conservation organization based in the Jersey Islands of the UK. And they work with species that are critically endangered, species basically on the brink, like the last few, and they bring them back. And he said, we must understand, quote, we must understand that true conservation success can take decades before tangible, measurable results are seen. It's not a matter like National Geographic show where it's going to happen in an hour. All right, you're going to take years and years. You're going to try. You're going to try. You're going to fail. You're going to try again because you're working with live animals. There's anything can happen, and the precedent is already set because not just with sea turtles, but not just with green turtles, also the blue iguana, our own blue dragon. When they started their program back in 2003, there were only about 15 iguanas.
Yeah,
15 blue iguanas left. The last blue iguanas on the planet. Right, from that small gene pool, they managed to, by 2018, they managed to bring it up to 1,000. So they went from brink of extinction to endangered or critically endangered. But it took them about 15 years or so, and that's a much faster breeding animal.
Right, they have a quicker turnover.
Yeah, quicker turnover. So there's already another precedent there.
So
Sea turtles just take longer.
So the Cayman Islands is actually really doing the thing out here with conservation efforts with the blue iguana and the green sea turtle.
Oh yeah, blue and green. That's a good green, not the other ones, not the ones that shall not be named.
Yeah, so I think this raises the questions of we got the results of this study, but where do we go from here? The results are nice, but as Getty's touched on, we do still have a lot of work still to do with bringing the turtles back and keeping them at sustainable numbers. So we're going to keep continuing our releases. We're going to keep continuing our research and constantly improving those methods as the years go on, as we've already done in the 55 years of conservation that we've had already. We always want to share the message of just how important sea turtles are to us in the Cayman Islands, not only through our culture, but also for the environment. We're all connected and we all need to do our part to keep each other healthy. And by keeping our turtles and our oceans healthy, we're keeping ourselves healthy too. But it's not just that. You can contribute, whether that's individual contributions. We're releasing turtles, but you guys can play a role in that too. You can come help volunteer at some of our releases, or you can just even participate in a release. Just your attendance alone is having a massive effect on turtle conservation in the Cayman Islands. And finally, just share the message. We're out here to share the message of sea turtles, why they're important, and also the work that we do. So if you enjoyed listening to us today, maybe contact someone else you know who you think might be interested and share this with them, and they might learn a lot about our programs at the Turtle Centre as well.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for another successful episode of The Green Scene. This is our second episode, and we're so excited to bring to you guys. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you learned a lot from us today. I hope we also get some interest from you guys. We're hoping to get some emails. And just a reminder for anyone who's interested in volunteering or finding out about future summer releases, info@turtle.ky. Join us next week right after the King's coronation on Bobo 89.1 FM. Next week, we'll have a special guest host, Miss Erin Kaufman, and we'll be talking about our second act talk, Iron Men in Wooden Ships, where we discuss the cultural history of the Cayman Islands.
You'll be listening to The Green Scene, hosted by Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Center. Catch us every Saturday at 11 a.m. right here on Bobo 89.1 FM.
We're inviting you to our new show.